We sometimes get the impression when reading about Paul's journeys in Acts or looking at maps of the journeys that Paul was constantly on the move. It's true, Paul was a man in a hurry. For one thing, he was sure the end of the age was near. Time was running out for spreading the gospel. Also, Paul was driven by his strong conviction that Jesus was the Savior of the whole world, Gentiles as well as Jews. And his call was to proclaim the gospel throughout the Gentile world. Paul's usual pattern was to go to cities and stay there just long enough to get a new church started and then move on, leaving to the new congregation the responsibility of spreading the gospel to the surrounding areas. But his pattern changed when he got to Corinth and Ephesus. In fact, he spent nearly half of his time in those two cities. Professor Dan P. Cole will explain why as he introduces us to Ephesus, a cosmopolitan city that boasted one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world, the temple of the goddess Artemis. Take note of the city's tradition of culture, education, artistry, and commerce. All of these elements add to our understanding of the significance of the city of Ephesus in Paul's evangelistic strategies.
When studying Ephesians, we should take time to look at Ephesus, the city. It was a very important base for Paul, and later it may have played a vital role in the collection of his letters. Acts 13 through 20 describes 3 missionary journeys by Paul over a 7-year period from about AD 48 to 55. During the first 3 years, Paul swept through Cyprus, Asia Minor, Macedonia, founding churches in 10 key cities, staying perhaps 2-3 months per city, as he raced to spread the good news about Christ before the end he thought was coming soon. But Paul slowed down when he reached Corinth, staying 18 months. Then he moved his base to Ephesus, staying there 2.5 years. For the latter half of or more of Paul's so-called journeys, he was not an itinerant. He was a resident preacher at Corinth and then at Ephesus, the city where he stayed longer than any other place. Why? One important reason was that Corinth and Ephesus were hub cities for travelers across the northern Mediterranean. And Paul saw these travelers as potential converts who could carry the gospel to many new regions. Ephesus, though, was even more strategically located than Corinth. Its large harbor was a stopping point not only for travelers going east and west, but also for those heading north or south to Egypt or inland into Asia Minor. And here, Paul could stay in close contact by letters with the churches he had already founded, both in Asia Minor and in Macedonia and Greece, because of the ease of communication between major cities in the early Roman Empire. Paul wrote his first letter to the Thessalonians from Corinth, and at Ephesus he wrote several of the other letters we have, including his letters to the Corinthians. The archaeological remains at Ephesus suggest further reasons why this city was so attractive to Paul as a missionary base. Ephesus proves to have been one of the largest cities of the Roman Empire. Archaeologists estimate a population of up to 250,000 people. And it was opulent with marble-paved streets lined by colonnades, monuments, mosaic pavements, temples, and forums. Lavishly decorated homes of wealthy aristocrats have been uncovered. I think Paul knew that the church at Ephesus could grow to large numbers and have the resources to take a leadership role in Christian evangelism. Ephesus was a cultural crossroads between East and West. This column capital, lying upside down just after excavation, deliberately mixes the spiraling volutes of the Greek Ionic order and the bull's head motif borrowed from Persian palaces to the east. Such eclectic merging of art and architectural forms reflects this city's cosmopolitan atmosphere. Paul was laboring hard to dissolve the barriers between East and West in the Christian fellowship and to unite Jews with Gentiles. Ephesus provided a receptive environment from which to preach his world-embracing gospel. Ephesus was also an important intellectual center. This recently re-erected facade of the magnificent Library of Celsus was built a half-century after Paul was there, but it reflects a tradition of scholarship and intellectual inquiry in this region that goes back centuries. Great minds had flourished in this area. Thales, the father of mathematics, the philosophers Anaximander and Anaximenes, Herodotus the historian, Hippocrates the physician. Centuries later, Paul probably was delighted to lock horns with the prestigious scholars he found here. Perhaps his sessions with them inspired the words he wrote from Ephesus to the Corinthians about the foolishness of God being wiser than human wisdom. Ephesus held the major religious shrine of the Ephesian goddess Artemis, called Diana by the Romans. This statue, uncovered at Ephesus, is one of several replicas of the grand cult statue that stood in her great temple nearby. The Ephesian Artemis had a reputation as the superlative mother goddess, and we see her here covered with symbols associated with her superabundant fertility. Her temple was declared one of the 7 wonders of the world and attracted pilgrims from all over the Mediterranean. The cult of Artemis represented a formidable challenge to Paul. Acts 19 records a near riot incited by the silver makers whose business of making votive statues of Artemis was being hurt by Paul's preaching. Demonstrators packed this theater at Ephesus, which could hold almost 25,000 people, chanting, "Great is Artemis of the Ephesians," attempting to get Paul jailed. When Paul wrote in 1 Corinthians 16:9, explaining why he was staying longer at Ephesus, he said, "A wide door for effective work has opened to me, and there are many adversaries." Certainly the Artemis cult was among his Ephesian adversaries. So the evidence from geography and archaeology suggests that Ephesus was important to Paul for several reasons: strategic location, great size and wealth, the merging here of Eastern and Western cultures, its major intellectual center, and the special challenge presented by its popular pilgrim shrine to Artemis. Later, Ephesus may have played another very important role for Paul and for us. Some years after Paul's death, someone was inspired to collect Paul's letters to individual churches and to publish them for the church at large. A number of scholars think this collection most likely was made at Ephesus. Further, it's been suggested that the letter called Ephesians, which draws so heavily from Paul's other letters, may have been written at that time to circulate with Paul's letters as a general introduction to Paul's message. Whether Ephesians was written by Paul or later by someone inspired by Paul, we well may be indebted to the church at Ephesus for gathering and circulating Paul's letters, thereby preserving them for us.